When we talk about inequalities, yes, you will see signs such as these, right? Your greater than or equal to, your less than or equal to, and I highlight the wrong one. Oh my goodness, I'm special. Greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Alright, that's what I meant to do. So, when you're dealing with inequalities, you need to be able to identify which of these symbols will be in your inequality, because as Talisha was highlighting, there's something that we do with them on graphs, and we need to know when we represent a particular inequality on a graph how we represent it, because the representation is going to be different for each case. So Alicia remembers the signs. All right, so like I was saying, this one over here is our greater than sign, right? And this greater than sign means that it is strict, because we are considering values that are greater than whatever value we're dealing with. So we'll get into some examples in a little bit. So when we talk about greater than and we talk about less than, these two particular symbols over here, these are what we called strict inequalities, all right? Strict inequalities, these two, they are strict, very strict. Okay, and the reason why I'm highlighting the two that are strict is because this might help with you being able to remember which inequalities, when you represent them on a number line or you represent them on a graph, what that representation will look like for strict inequalities versus those non-strict inequalities. So these are the two that are non-strict, this one being our greater than or equal to, I'm too lazy, equal to. And then this one, which is the less than or equal to. Alright, so these are non-strict. And we're going to take a look at the representation in a little bit. And maybe it might jolt some memories of Form 2, Form 3 for some people. Alright, so when we deal with inequalities, alright, Talisha was also highlighting, she remembers in some cases you'll have to solve for x, and yes, we need to know about those cases as well when we have to solve for x. But before we get into that one, let's talk about some examples, alright? So let's say I had something like this. I'm going to just use like one value straight through, alright? And hopefully that will help with highlighting the difference in the representations. Okay, so one of the things that we do with inequalities, we represent them on a number line. Alright, so this is the first step of representation we're going to look at. So we're going to look at representation on a number line. Alright, so anybody, tell me what is the first thing that you think about when you hear you have to represent an inequality on a number line? What comes to mind? Anybody? If you have to represent an inequality on a number line, what's the first thing that you think about doing? Alright, yeah, that's the one thing that we want to start off by doing. So we're going to start off with a number line. We need to locate where 4 is. So every time you do your number line, the first thing you want to probably do is identify where 0 is. and 4 might be somewhere like around there, right? My number line is not drawn to scale. Alright, let me just see what Tiran says. Data, I understand. Alright, no problem. Okay, so let's talk about the representation of our inequality now. So Adina mentioned we're starting off by looking for 4 on the number line. So we draw a number line, find where 4 is. What do we do from here now? Alright, so over here, this symbol, since x is greater than 4, like she's saying, we need an arrow that will be moving to the right. But to the right of what? So, go ahead, explain it. You said by putting the arrow to move to the right, so let's say it goes like this. To the right of what? Should it be to the right of 0? All the way from here. Should it be to the right of 4? Should it be to the right of... that's the only 2 things I could think of. Where would we put this arrow moving to the right of? To the right of 4. So I see Nadira put it there. Adina, you just said to the right of 4 as well? Okay, now how do we know that we are putting this arrow to move to the right of 4? Anybody tell me? I mean, right. That's it. X is more than 4, so therefore the arrow has to move to the right of 4. So we're considering the values that are greater than 4. Now, you'll recall here Talisha mentioned something about some circle being shaded and a circle being unshaded and whatnot and the other. When does the circle come into the inequality representation? And where will we put the circle and how are we going to put the circle? Help her out, you all, she said. She's trying to remember, so you'll her. There we go. Lovely. So, we're going to put a circle above 4. Alright? Whenever we're dealing with inequalities, this symbol is going to tell us not just the direction of the arrow, but it's also going to tell us if we shade in the circle or we don't shade the circle. And as we just heard, if for some reason you're dealing with a symbol like this one, this circle will not be shaded. So that's the reason why I didn't shade it in. Alright, so I just couldn't do over that properly. Alright, so this is what your inequality x is greater than 4 will look like on a number line. Alright, you have an open circle above 4 and an arrow that is moving to the right. Okay, so does this look familiar? Does this look familiar to you all? Alright, nice. So miss, is it shaded when it is greater than or less than? We'll answer that question in a short bit. So the circle is shaded when it's greater or less than, and not shaded when it's greater or equal to and less or equal to. I think Tiran has the idea of what she's supposed to be doing, but she mixed them up a little bit. So anytime you're dealing with the strict inequalities, because let's talk about representing x less than 4 now. If you have to represent x less than 4 on a number line, what will you do? You start off with your number line again. You find this value on your number line, and then what you're going to do to represent x less than 4 on your number line. There we go. So we put the circle above 4, and then the arrow is moving to the left of 4. So all these wonderful values. Alright, so this is x is less than 4, this is x is greater than 4. And like I was saying, I wanted to do them in this way because notice specifically that when you deal with these two inequalities, what did I say about these two inequalities, the less than and the greater than? What did I refer to them as just now? What did I say about these two inequalities? They are strict. Okay, so when we talk about strict inequalities, you are not shading in the circle because you are not going to include that value. That is what it means to be a strict inequality. All right, that value is not going to be included. It is strictly over that particular value. So it's kind of like the sale of alcohol is prohibited for individuals under the age of 18. So it means to say that you have to be 18 and over, and that one would be inclusive, right? But if we are being strict about it, it means even if you are, like in this case, it's 4. Even if it is 4, 4 is not greater than 4. Something like 4.1 is still greater than 4. So you will consider everything that is greater than 4. And likewise over here, 4 is not less than 4, 4 is 4. So you have to think about a value like 3.98, for example, is still less than 4. Alright? So that's what it means to be strict. You don't include the value. Alright? So we're going to deal with these two. Like I said, these are the non-strict inequalities. And we're going to do the representation for those as well. So before I do that, let me see what we have here. Oh my gosh. I hope that the recording will help her and give us some clarity. But if you're only picking up on bits and pieces, if you're hearing me right now, we're dealing with the inequalities. We just talked about how we represent strict inequalities on a number line, and now we're going to deal with the non-strict inequalities, alright? So for strict inequalities, the summary of it, you do not shade the circle, and depending on the type of inequality, if it's less than or greater than, the arrow will move off in the direction according to that particular symbol. So greater than means that we move to the right, and less than means that we move to the left. Okay, so let's look at the other two. So if I want to represent this third inequality on a number line, so I have x is greater than or equal to 4. We start off same way like the others. We have our number line, identify where the number is, and then from there, what are we going to do to represent the inequality? Anybody? What should we do to represent this inequality on the number line? There we go. So it's more or less the same thing like you would have done with your greater than, except this time you're going to shade in the circle. So you're going to have a shaded circle and arrow moving to the right for this x is greater than or equal to 4. In this case, why we shade the circle? Because it says that we are including this particular value. So this is the reason why it is important for us to be able to interpret these inequalities. When we deal with strict inequalities, we know that we don't shade in the circle. But here, in particular, with the non-strict inequalities, we have to shade it in. And as I was about to say, when we deal with linear programming, it's going to be very important for us to be able to distinguish between the strict and the non-strict inequalities, because in linear programming, when you have to represent your inequalities on a graph, you will need to know whether or not you are going to include the values that lie on a particular straight line or not. Alright, so that's why we need to be very familiar with the representation of the inequalities on a number line first, and then by extension, you'll be a bit better at handling inequalities on a graph. So let's get into doing the final one, which is x is less than or equal to 4. How would we represent this one? Lovely, and that's what we do. So we're going to have a shaded circle over 4, and then we move to the left of 4. So our arrow moves off in this direction. Alright, so like I was saying, the purpose of using the same value is just to give you that comparison. What does greater than look like versus less than? And what do strict inequalities look like versus non-strict? Alright, so once you are able to identify and distinguish between these types of inequalities, representing them on a number line should be no big issue for you, alright?